right, part 2, we're going to look at early models of communication, but we're also going to include communication principles and misconceptions here. All right, brief history, just to say basically that our idea, oh, come on, there we go. Our idea of communication and what it means is evolving. So in the 1950s, kind of where, when people really started thinking about radio and TV, they started thinking about communication. And they initially thought of communication as linear. They used the example of an archer shooting a bow at shooting an arrow. I guess you wouldn't shoot a bow. Shooting an arrow at a target. The archer was the sender, the arrow was the message, the target is the receiver. And then people said, yeah, but the receiver does have something to do with it. So then they said, well, it's more like a tennis match where, I'm hitting the ball over the net, and you're ready and you're giving me feedback in some ways. And then they said, that doesn't work either. And so the more, I'm sure it's going to evolve again, but the current model that most communication scholars would talk about is the transitional communication model. I like to call it the Stewie Griffin model because to me this looks like Stewie from Family Guy. All right, I want to explain what this all means. So the blue ellipse football shape is one communicator. The yellow one is the other communicator. And so you see that in both of these football shapes, we've got a circle where we say the communicator sends a message, receives a message, and assigns meaning to the message, right? In the middle, this orange double-sided arrow has to do with two things, both the channel and the message. So the message is what you've actually decided you're going to say, and the channel refers to how you have chosen to send the message. Are you going to talk to someone face-to-face? Are you going to send them an email? Are you going to tweet? Are you going to post something to your Instagram page? Just all the different channels. And I like the fact that it's a double-sided arrow because it's saying that the communication is going in both directions at all time. All right. A very important concept here is the idea of environment. And when we think of environment, we frequently think of the idea of, where we are. But there's so much that goes in beyond that goes into environment. I'm talking to you, and we're maybe having a breakdown in communication. All right, so if you notice, the blue part is all of blue's environment, and the yellow is all of yellow's environment, and you see the part that's both blue and yellow. That's the area where they have things in common. So if I'm talking to you, I like to use this as an example where I say, who went to a small high school? Well, we have different ideas on what small means or what big means depending on the environment that where we grew up. So some of the things that go into environment could be our ethnic group, could be our socioeconomic status, it could be how we're feeling at the moment. So there's an awful lot that goes into environment. And what I think is crucial here is when you look at this, there's not an awful lot of overlap. So to me, this means there is plenty of room for miscommunication to happen. All right. And you see these arrows going through that say noise. There's always noise when we communicate that can impact the message that we're sending and the message that we are receiving. And the noise, I think I'm kind of jumping, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So let me go to the next slide. So we talked about the idea of channels. We talked about the idea of environment. I'm going to get to noise in a minute, and that the communicator is both the sender and the receiver. And because of that, we are sending and receiving messages simultaneously. If I'm in the classroom and I'm talking and I notice that somebody looks confused, even though I'm the one talking, they are still communicating to me. There's the nonverbal component. All right. The meanings among people, I don't like the way they said it. The idea that it's more like meanings exist in and among people. Perhaps you and your friend group have a certain way of talking that other people outside of the group don't understand. You might have a specific slang. In my house, with my siblings, we have a phrase that we use, and it's early so back. Here's a little story. Many years ago, we were going to go to the lake to go swimming. We drove around we got maybe 2 minutes away, and we realized we had forgotten something, so we circled around and went back. And my younger brother says, "Oh, people are going to see us, and they're going to say, 'Early so back.'" He meant to say either "back so soon" or "you're back early." So it became "early so back." And so that's, if anyone leaves and then comes right back, other people in the family will say "early so back." Okay. So to other people, that's total nonsense, but to us, it means something. There's also, I like the book said, somebody might say, where's this? "You're pretty smart." Is that a compliment? Is it a dig at you? So there's a meaning of words that we can look up in the dictionary, but there's also a meaning that we assign to it, and the person that we're talking to assigns to it. And so that is a really important concept. I mean, it's also, think about, I don't know if this ever happened to you as a kid. You said something and maybe a parent called you out on it, and you said, "What did I say?" And they said it wasn't what you said, it was how you said it. So there's a little bit of that meaning there. All right, so I wanted to get to the idea of noise, that there are 3 kinds of noise that can impact our communication. There's external noise. I know you can't hear it, but someone in my neighborhood is mowing their lawn, and so there's that zzz in the background. So they just stopped. That can potentially impact communication. There's also physiological noise. We're going to hear this word physiological a couple of times, and the physiology refers to of the body. So physiological, that was hard to say, noise can be, you have a cold and so your ear's blocked. So that's kind of getting in the way. Or you have a headache, or anything that's going on in the body that is getting in the way of you being able to completely capture the message. And there's also psychological. You're trying to listen. You have a friend who's complaining about how hard their life is, and you've got a big math test coming up, and you really can't focus because of the psychological stuff, technical term we use in communication, everything that's going on emotionally. So sometimes I think with all of these things that go into this transactional communication model, it's a wonder that we don't have more breakdowns in communication. So you guys are going to have to be the experts on this. I do not tweet. When Twitter first started, I set up a Twitter account, have never tweeted anything. So just let me know when we get to class. Do you see a difference if you tweet? Are there differences between tweets sent from a mobile, from your phone, as opposed to from your desktop computer or laptop computer? Do you communicate? So that's kind of in general, and then this is personal to you. Do you communicate differently from your phone than you do from stationary computers? And I want to call your attention to a very important word here. If I use the word you, I mean you specifically. So if I ask a question and I say, "How do you?" that I'm asking you to go into your own life. If I want a generic or a general, I would say people or students or I don't know, married couples or whatever the specific is. Okay. So here's another thing that we can discuss on Wednesday. We won't discuss this as much as the first one. Give examples of when someone has used the incorrect channel. Sending a tweet when face-to-face would have been more appropriate. Many, many years ago, this was really before people were, I don't even think Twitter existed. I had a student who admitted that he had broken up with his girlfriend by leaving a voicemail on her phone. So, we just think about things like that. Okay. Now I want to talk about these 4 communication principles that are absolutely fundamental going forward, and then we're going to look at some communication misconceptions. All right. First one is communication is transactional. That means that the transaction is as I communicate with you, you're communicating with me, and we are creating meaning at the same time. It's in our transaction, in our back and forth, where meaning is created. Okay. Point number 2, communication can be intentional or it can be unintentional. Intentional, I see you and I haven't looked at the class list yet, and I say, I remember. I say, Raphael, I'd like to talk to you after class today if you have a couple minutes. That was intentional. Maybe, I wish I could, I don't know. I'm going to just imagine we have a student in class whose name is Patrick, and let's say he's a clown in class, and so he does something, and I kind of roll my eyes, and he catches me doing that. Did I intend for him to see that? I did not. Did I communicate something to him by my eye roll? Yes, I did. Okay. There's another story. So my husband is from Niger in West Africa, and a cultural, something that people do that is completely normal in Niger and in other cultures is men who are friends will hold hands. There's nothing sexual at all about it. So my husband he was a teacher at a middle school, and he was with a bunch of his friends, and they're people are walking, and then someone walks up a little bit ahead or falls back, and so my husband's there, and he kind of reaches out and grabs onto the hand of the person next to him, and he says, the problem with the principal is he tries to make everybody happy, and you can't do that. And the person next to him goes, oh, so that's how I behave? All right. So in one sense, the communication was intentional. My husband intended to say this. In one case, it was unintentional because he did not mean for his boss to hear that. Okay. Principle number 3 is communication is irreversible. Once it's been communicated, once it's been said, once it's been tweeted, emailed, you can't take it back. I guess in the game of golf, there's a move called a mulligan where it's like a do-over. You put something online and you take it down and you say, that's gone. Well, if somebody forwards it, it can live forever. So maybe think before you communicate. Let's see. Communication is, they skipped it in the slides. Dang, communication is unrepeatable. You cannot have the same conversation twice. I noticed this when I would teach multiple sections of the same course. I would create my lesson. I would go into one class and it would work really well. And I would say, I'm going to do this in the next class. And I do this and it just didn't come out the same way. Well, why could that be? Because communication is transactional and it depends on who the receivers are, who the other communicators are. Okay. Last point here, communication has a content and a relational dimension. We will talk more about content in chapter 6, about the words that are actually said. It's hot in here. And a relational dimension, which lets communicators know how we feel about each other. And that we'll get to more in chapter 7. So chapter 6 is language, and chapter 7 is nonverbal communication. So think about it. In class, I could say, come in and sit down. Okay, there's the content. Or I could say, come in and sit down. Exact same words. Slightly different meaning, would you say? How did I feel about the first person? Maybe kind of welcoming. How did I feel about the second person? Definitely a little ticked off with them. Okay, so this idea of content and relational dimension is going to keep coming back. And if you don't understand, please let me know, because I want to make sure that that is clear. All right, the last, okay. I like describe an interaction in which the message needed clearer content or more concrete relational dimensions. So it's a time where there was an issue with your communication, and your communication could have been clearer if you were more clear about the content. I remember being on the phone with someone once and saying, okay, so tomorrow we'll meet here. Well, where's here? Here was where I was, and they didn't know where I was. So the next day they were at my house, and I was at the phone company. So, okay. Or a more concrete relational dimension. Maybe, okay, you guys can figure this out. Alrighty. Here are the 4 communication misconceptions. There are more, but these are the big ones. So we think that communication always seeks understanding, but truly, not all communication seeks understanding, because there are things like rituals. Hey, how are you? If somebody says to you, how you doing? How are you? Do you say fine, thanks, even if you've got a collapsed lung? Really, they're just rituals that we go through. Or sometimes you are being deliberately ambiguous. Hey, we should get together. Yes, let's get together soon. What's soon? Okay. So more communication is not always better. Sometimes we think if I could just talk about this more, then it would be understood. And sometimes I'm sure you've all realized this, the more you talk, let's say there's someone that you're communicating with, and the two of you have very different ideas about cilantro. I can't stand it. To me, it tastes like soap. And I'm going to convince you that cilantro is evil. And I'm just going to talk and talk and talk. And you love it. You put it in everything you can. Well, the more I talk, the more ticked off with me you're going to get. So communicating more is not going to make it better. We should just agree to, disagree and walk away. Okay. Number 3, communication should solve all problems, but obviously not. We just have to realize that while communication satisfies many needs, it is very useful. We can't survive without it. There are some problems that just we can't communicate away. All right. Last of all, and most important for a lot of people, sometimes we think that someone was a born excellent communicator. I used to think that my younger sister was just, she was just born with it. So I was, as a lot of kids are, I was a very friendly child up through maybe elementary school. And then I hit the awkward stage, and I was not a confident communicator, middle school, high school, even into college. And I thought my younger sister, who basically can meet you and in the grocery store, and by the time you guys are checking out, she's inviting you over for dinner because she's just talking. And my father was this great communicator also, and I just figured I didn't get the communication gene. Okay, well, 2 things here. One, I realized that though both my father and my sister were great talkers. My sister is not a great listener. My father was not a great listener. They really preferred to be the center of attention. Well, if communication is transactional and you're not listening to the other person, then you're really not communicating that well. Okay. But also, so in high school, I was quite shy and I felt socially awkward. I thought everyone was looking at me and judging me. And honestly, people are really too self-absorbed to be looking at other people and judging them. And so I decided when I went to college, I could be the communicator that I wanted to be. And I didn't, not so much. And then when I graduated from college, I joined Peace Corps and I went to Niger in West Africa. And I figured, I am on a new continent. There is no one on this continent who knows me, who's going to say, oh, but you were really shy. And so I decided I could become the kind of communicator that I wanted. And I worked on it. I mean, I'm the kind of person, I used to break out in hives if I had to give a speech in front of the class in high school. Even when I was working on my master's degree, I had to present my research topic. And at the end, everyone said, we thought you were going to faint. You were so pale. So you can learn to become an effective communicator. And I wanted to draw your attention to the word effective. We're not going to say good. We're not going to say bad. Right? Those are value words. We're going to look at how effective our communication is. And when we talk about communication competence, we're also going to look at appropriateness of communication. So I want you to think about those 4 communication misconceptions and maybe come in with a story that tells us which of the communication misconceptions has had an impact on one of your recent exchanges. All right? So that is, section 2. I hit the wrong button. I'm still getting used to this new computer. So I'm going to take a break and then we'll get on to section 3.